I am Darren Cave, 24 years old, and in 10 minutes I will die in the vacuum of space. This is justice, I suppose. Mathematical, clean, efficient. The kind of solution I spent 2 years engineering for others. The irony is not lost on me. I stand in the airlock chamber of the Star Destroyer Relentless, wrists bound in Durasteel binders, watching the digital countdown on the bulkhead display tick towards zero. My body weighs 63 kilograms now, 17 less than when I graduated from the Imperial Academy with honors. The uniform they gave me for this final walk hangs loose on a frame hollowed out by stress and sleeplessness, and something else. Something that ate me from the inside, cell by cell, choice by choice, until what remained was this: a collection of bones and guilt wearing the skin of the man I used to be. I grew up on Corellia, in the industrial districts where the starship yards dominated the skyline like steel mountains. My father worked the assembly lines for 40 years, came home each night with hands stained black from coolant and lubricant, smelling of ozone and welding torch smoke. He was proud of his work, proud to build the ships that connected the galaxy, that carried families and cargo and hope across impossible distances. I wanted that pride, wanted to create things, fix things, be part of something larger than myself. When the Empire rose from the ashes of the Clone Wars, promising order and stability and an end to the chaos that had killed my mother in a separatist bombing, I believed. I believed in structure, in discipline, in the necessity of strong systems that would prevent the galaxy from tearing itself apart again. The Academy accepted my application when I was 19. I excelled in engineering, systems design, life support architecture, environmental controls. The instructors praised my attention to detail, my ability to optimize complex systems, my talent for finding elegant solutions to difficult problems. I graduated second in my class, assigned to the Relentless as a junior life support technician responsible for sections D47 through D53. Standard work: monitoring oxygen levels, maintaining temperature regulation, ensuring that 7,000 crew members could breathe and eat and sleep in the cold vacuum between stars. Honest work. Important work. I was 22 years old and believed I was serving something noble. The first 18 months were exactly what I expected. Routine maintenance, system diagnostics, the comfortable rhythm of technical problems that had technical solutions. I learned every conduit and junction and redundancy protocol in my assigned sections, made friends with other engineers, ate meals in the crew mess where we complained about officers and equipment requisitions and the endless bureaucracy that made simple repairs take weeks. Sent half my pay back to my father on Corellia, saved the rest for a future that seemed stable and predictable. I was content, more than content. I was proud to wear the Imperial uniform, proud to keep the ship's systems running, proud to be a small but necessary part of the machine that maintained galactic order. But the Relentless was more than a warship. Deep in the lower decks, beneath the crew quarters and machinery spaces and storage bays, were detention levels, holding cells for prisoners, rebel suspects, smugglers, political dissidents, anyone the ISB deemed a threat to Imperial security. I rarely went down there. My work kept me in the upper sections where life support was straightforward and apolitical. Deliver oxygen, remove carbon dioxide, maintain comfortable temperatures. Sometimes, though, maintenance required me to access junction points near the detention levels. And sometimes, when the corridors were quiet and my tools were spread across an open panel, I would hear sounds filtering through the ventilation ducts, screaming, pleading, the wet, meaty impact of fists on flesh. Once, I heard a woman's voice begging someone to stop. Please stop. Her children were waiting for her. I told myself these were criminals, terrorists who had chosen violence over law, who threatened the stability that the Empire provided. I told myself that whatever happened in those cells was necessary, that the officers conducting interrogations understood things I did not, that my job was simply to maintain the systems and trust that the hierarchy knew what it was doing. I was an engineer, not an interrogator, not a soldier. Just a technician who kept the air flowing and the lights burning. That distinction felt important, felt like a shield that protected me from complicity. 3 ABY, 2 weeks after the Battle of Hoth. The Rebel Alliance was in full retreat, their base on the ice planet destroyed, their forces scattered across the galaxy like debris from a shattered ship. The Relentless was part of the hunt, tracking down fleeing transports and supply vessels, capturing anyone who might provide intelligence about remaining rebel strongholds. We intercepted a civilian transport in the Isung Corridor, an old YT model freighter with failing shields and a hyperdrive that left an ion trail visible from 3 sectors away. Easy prey. The boarding party brought back 47 prisoners, men and women in civilian clothing, a few elderly, several children. The ship's manifest listed them as refugees displaced by the fighting on Hoth, claiming no affiliation with the rebellion. ISB said otherwise. Claimed they were rebel sympathizers, transporting supplies and intelligence, using families as cover for their operations. The prisoners were processed and loaded into detention cells on D-Deck Level 3. My level. I was running diagnostics on environmental systems when Commander Vrain found me at my duty station. He was ISB, Internal Security Bureau. Tall and thin, with the kind of pale complexion that came from spending too much time in artificial light, interrogating people in windowless rooms. His uniform was immaculate, his voice soft and reasonable, the tone of someone explaining a simple technical problem that required a simple technical solution. Technician Cave, we need your assistance with a detention matter. We're conducting enhanced interrogations on the prisoners from the transport. Standard procedure requires environmental adjustments to facilitate cooperation. You'll need to reduce oxygen levels in cells 47 through 52 to 85%. Maintain that level for 20 minutes, then restore to normal. Enhanced interrogations. Environmental adjustments. The language was clinical, bureaucratic, designed to transform horror into procedure. I understood what he was asking. Suffocation as a tool, controlled oxygen deprivation to break resistance and extract information. I had read about such techniques in academy courses on prisoner handling, discussed them in abstract theoretical contexts where they seemed like logical applications of environmental control theory. But this was different. This was specific. Cells 47 through 52. 20 minutes. A button I would press that would make 47 people, including children whose voices I had heard through the ventilation ducts, struggle to breathe. Sir, My voice caught. Is this authorized by Admiral Constantine personally? Vrain's tone remained pleasant, but something cold flickered in his eyes. The prisoners are rebel agents using civilian cover. They possess intelligence regarding Alliance operations in the Outer Rim. This is a matter of Imperial security. You have your orders, technician. I looked at my control panel. Clean white interface, green status indicators, everything functioning within normal parameters. A simple adjustment. Reduce oxygen concentration in specified zones, maintain for specified duration, restore. The system was designed for exactly this kind of precise control. I had performed similar operations 100 times during drills and maintenance procedures. The mechanics were identical. Only the purpose had changed. I pressed the sequence, felt the controls respond under my fingertips, smooth and precise. Engineering excellence translating human input into systematic action. On my display, oxygen levels in detention cells, 47 through 52, began dropping from standard 21% to 85%. Gradual decline, carefully calibrated, optimized to create discomfort and panic without causing immediate unconsciousness or death. Good design. My design. I had helped upgrade these environmental systems 6 months ago, had written efficiency reports praising their responsiveness and precision. Through the intercom system connected to detention monitoring, I heard it begin. coughing at first, harsh, rasping sounds as lungs struggled to extract oxygen from thinning air. Then voices, confused and frightened, asking what was happening, why they couldn't breathe properly. Then panic, shouting, pounding on cell doors, the high-pitched wail of a child crying for her mother. The sounds merged into a desperate chorus that filled my headset and my head in the small control room where I sat watching oxygen levels hold steady at 85%. 20 minutes. Commander Vrain stood beside me, observing, making notes on a data pad. Occasionally he would speak into his comm link, receiving updates from interrogators in the cells, adjusting questions based on the prisoners' deteriorating conditions. He was professional, focused, treating this as a technical operation that required proper documentation and oversight. Just procedure, just systems functioning as designed. At 18 minutes, a man's voice came through the intercom, hoarse and broken. "Please, whatever you want to know, anything, just let my daughter breathe. She's 7 years old. Please." Another voice, younger, gasping, "Daddy, I can't." Then coughing, wet and terrible, and the sound of a body hitting the floor. "Excellent," Vrain said softly. "Restore oxygen, technician." I pressed the sequence, watched oxygen levels climb back to normal, smooth and efficient, exactly as the system was designed to perform. The sounds from the detention level changed, gasping relief, sobbing, the desperate gulps of people who had touched the edge of asphyxiation and pulled back just in time. All 47 survived. Mission success. Parameters maintained. Equipment functioning optimally. "Good work, Cave." Vrain made a final note on his datapad. "Your systems performed exactly as required. The prisoners are being quite cooperative now. You've contributed to Imperial security today. Your efficiency is noted." He left. I sat at my control panel, staring at green status indicators that confirmed all environmental systems had returned to normal operating ranges. My hands were shaking. Not visibly, just a fine tremor in my fingers that made the controls seem to vibrate slightly when I touched them. I felt cold despite the comfortable temperature, and there was a taste in my mouth like copper and ash, like something fundamental had corroded. That night, I lay in my bunk, unable to sleep, replaying the sequence. The button press, the oxygen levels dropping, the sounds of 47 people struggling to breathe because I had made a technical adjustment to life support systems. I told myself I had not killed anyone. Told myself I was following orders from superior officers who understood the strategic necessity of such actions. Told myself that if I had refused, someone else would have done it anyway, and I would have been disciplined or reassigned or worse. Told myself I was just an engineer who maintained systems, that the moral responsibility belonged to the people who gave orders, not the technicians who executed them. These justifications felt hollow, like structures built from materials that could not bear weight. But I needed them. Needed to believe I could remain the person I had been. Honest, principled, serving something larger than myself. So I accepted the hollow justifications and filed them away in the same mental space where I kept other uncomfortable thoughts, and I reported for duty the next morning at 0700 hours, exactly as scheduled. 3 months later, they transferred me to what Commander Vrain called Special Technical Operations. A small team of engineers who designed and maintained equipment for enhanced interrogations. The pay was better, the security clearance higher, the work more specialized, requiring advanced knowledge of environmental systems, biomedical monitoring, and what they termed compliance engineering. We operated out of secure facilities on captured worlds where rebel activity was suspected. Lothal, Gorman, Onderon, installing interrogation equipment in ISB detention centers and training local personnel in its operation. My first major project was a neural shock generator for the facility on Lothal. The specifications were precise. deliver controlled electrical pulses to a subject's nervous system, calibrated to cause maximum pain without permanent damage or unconsciousness. Variable intensity settings, fail-safes to prevent accidental death, biomonitors to track subject vitals and adjust output accordingly. Advanced engineering that required sophisticated understanding of human physiology and electrical systems integration. I spent 6 weeks designing it, another 2 weeks overseeing installation and testing. It was elegant work, technically challenging, the kind of problem-solving I'd always enjoyed. They brought in test subjects for final calibration, prisoners scheduled for interrogation anyway, Commander Vrain explained, so we might as well optimize the equipment during actual operations. Made sense from an efficiency standpoint. The first subject was a Twi'lek woman in her 30s, identified in the detention records as Hera Syndulla, former teacher, suspected of providing intelligence to rebel cells operating in Lothal's industrial sectors. She was secured to the restraint chair I had helped design, biomonitors attached to her temples and chest, electrodes placed according to the targeting protocols I had calculated. Maximum intensity, the interrogator ordered. We need to establish her pain threshold for baseline calibration. I adjusted the controls. The generator activated with a high-pitched whine, electromagnetic coils charging, and Hera Syndulla's body convulsed as electricity flooded her nervous system. Her scream was unlike anything I'd heard before, raw, primal, the sound of a human mind confronting agony it had no capacity to process. The biomonitors spiked red, her heart rate climbing past 180, respiratory rate becoming erratic. I reduced the intensity. Her screaming subsided to gasping sobs. Again, the interrogator said. Sustained pulse, 45 seconds. My engineering partner, a man named Ayuro, who had worked on military shield generators before joining the Special Technical Division, looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. That duration at maximum intensity could cause cardiac arrest. Then reduce it appropriately, technician. The interrogator's voice held an edge of impatience. We need compliance, not corpses. That's why you're here, to keep subjects viable during extended sessions. I ran the calculations in my head. Heart rate, respiratory function, electrical resistance of human tissue, adjusted the output to 78% of maximum, initiated a sustained pulse. Hera Syndulla screamed again, her body straining against durasteel restraints, tendons standing out like cables under her skin. 45 seconds. The biomonitors showed dangerous levels, but nothing immediately fatal. I terminated the pulse. She slumped in the chair, unconscious or nearly so, her breathing shallow and irregular. Acceptable, the interrogator noted. Resume when she regains consciousness. We'll need 3 more sessions minimum to extract the information we require. Hera Syndulla died 47 minutes later. Cardiac failure, the medical report stated. Underlying health condition exacerbated by stress. No fault attributed to equipment, malfunction, or operator error. The neural shock generator had performed within design specifications. My design specifications. I filed the technical report, noted the subject's death as relevant data for future calibration protocols, and returned to my quarters, where I vomited bile into the refresher until my stomach was empty and my throat burned. Iro found me in the facility's common area that evening, staring at a mug of caf I had not drunk. He sat across from me, his face gray and haggard, looking older than his 31 years. We killed her, he said quietly. You understand that, right? We built the machine and we operated it, and we killed that woman. If we hadn't, someone else would have. The words came automatically, defensive. They would have found another engineer. The outcome would have been the same. Does that make it better? His eyes were bloodshot, haunted. Does that absolve us? I had no answer. I thought about my father on Corellia, building starships with his blackened hands, proud of his contribution to something larger than himself. I thought about the academy instructors who had praised my technical skills and attention to detail. I thought about the man I'd been 18 months ago, who believed he was serving order and stability and a galaxy that needed structure to heal from war. That man seemed impossibly distant now, separated from me by a gulf I could not name but could feel widening with each choice, each compromise, each justification that sounded reasonable until I examined it too closely. "We should resign," Iro said. "Request transfer back to standard engineering duties. Let someone else do this." "They won't approve it. Special Technical Operations has higher security clearance than standard divisions. Once you're in until they decide otherwise. And if we refuse assignments..." I let the implication hang between us. The Empire did not tolerate insubordination. Refusal meant detention, interrogation, possibly the same neural shock generators we had just installed, operated by engineers who would tell themselves they were simply following orders. Iro stood, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like tearing metal. "Then we're trapped. We're stuck doing this until what? Until enough people die that we've earned our retirement? Until we've inflicted so much suffering that they pat us on the back and let us pretend we were never here." He walked away. I sat alone with my cold caf, thinking about traps and choices and the slow process by which good people become complicit in atrocities. Not through dramatic moral failures or sudden descents into evil, but through incremental decisions that each seem reasonable in isolation. Accept the promotion, follow the order, press the button, adjust the system. Each step small enough to rationalize, large enough to move you further from the person you intended to be. By the time you realize how far you have traveled, the path back has disappeared behind you, overgrown and impassable. 9 months later, I was Senior Engineer for Special Technical Operations, supervising a team of 14 technicians across 5 facilities. My personnel file contained commendations for innovation in compliance systems design, efficiency in equipment deployment, and what Commander Vrain called exceptional dedication to mission objectives. I had designed 7 different interrogation devices, each one an improvement over the last. More precise, more reliable, more effective at extracting information while keeping subjects alive for extended sessions. Sound resonators that could induce migraine-level pain through acoustic frequency manipulation. Temperature chambers capable of cycling from freezing to extreme heat in controlled intervals. Sensory deprivation units that isolated subjects from all external stimuli until their minds began to fragment from the absence of input. I knew, with clinical precision, how to break a human being in 6 hours. Knew which combination of physical pain and psychological pressure would shatter resistance most efficiently. Knew the exact duration of sleep deprivation required to induce hallucinations without permanent cognitive damage. This knowledge had value to the Empire, made me indispensable, earned me respect from superior officers and fear from subordinates who understood what my technical expertise enabled. The screaming became background noise, white noise, easily filtered out, no more disturbing than the hum of machinery or the ambient sounds of recycled air flowing through ventilation systems. I ate meals in the facility commissary, discussed equipment upgrades with colleagues, filed reports detailing the performance characteristics of devices I had built to inflict calculated suffering. My weight dropped to 68 kilograms. The medic diagnosed a stress-induced ulcer, prescribed medication, noted in my file that I should consider counseling for anxiety management. I took the medication, skipped the counseling, continued working. They brought in a prisoner I recognized, Marcus Trell, a classmate from my technical school on Corellia. We had studied together, competed for top grades, celebrated graduation by getting drunk on stolen Corellian ale and talking about our futures in the expanded Imperial Engineering Corps. He had chosen civilian work, designing environmental systems for corporate installations. Apparently, he had made the mistake of working for a corporation with rebel sympathies, had been implicated in a sabotage investigation when one of his systems malfunctioned and allowed explosives to be smuggled into an Imperial depot. He saw me through the observation window as they strapped him into the restraint chair. His eyes widened with recognition, then with something worse. Understanding, horror, the terrible realization that someone he knew, someone he had trusted, was part of the machinery about to destroy him. Darren Cave? Is that really you? His voice carried through the intercom, disbelief mixing with desperation. Please, you have to tell them there's been a mistake. I didn't sabotage anything. The system was defective. I filed reports. I tried to fix it. You know me. You know I wouldn't. The interrogator looked at me. You know this subject, Technician Cave. We attended the same technical school years ago. No contact since graduation. My voice was steady, professional, reciting facts like equipment specifications. Any reason to doubt his guilt? I thought about saying yes, thought about defending Marcus, about using whatever credibility I had to suggest that maybe, possibly, this was a mistake. But defense would raise questions about my own loyalty, would make my superiors wonder if personal connections might compromise my effectiveness. And Marcus was already here, already designated for interrogation, already caught in the machine. Whether I defended him or not, the outcome was determined. My only choice was whether to preserve my position or sacrifice it uselessly. No reason to doubt it, sir. Should I proceed with the session? Marcus screamed my name for 3 hours. The sound resonator I had designed performed flawlessly, inducing precisely calibrated levels of pain through acoustic pressure that felt like knives being driven into his skull. Between pulses, the interrogator asked questions, made offers. Confess your rebel contacts, provide evidence against your employer, sign the confession, and the pain will stop. Marcus broke on the 4th hour. Signed everything they wanted, provided names I knew were fabricated because Marcus did not know any rebels, was simply a civilian engineer who had been unlucky enough to work on a defective system that the ISB found. Convenient to classify as sabotage. I wrote the technical report noting that equipment performance had been optimal and subject compliance had been achieved within expected time parameters. Then I went to the commissary, ate synthetic meat and processed vegetables, and felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. The capacity for emotional response had been burned out of me, replaced by the hollow efficiency of someone who performed tasks without questioning their purpose or consequence. RO killed himself 2 weeks after Marcus's interrogation, took an unauthorized speeder to Lothel's orbital elevator, and jumped from a maintenance platform on the upper levels. The fall took 17 seconds. His body hit the ground in the industrial district where civilians worked and lived and pretended not to notice the Imperial facilities conducting their secret operations in nearby buildings. The official report classified it as an accident, unauthorized access, mechanical failure, tragic but unrelated to duty stress. At his memorial service, Commander Vrain spoke about the dangers of working at heights and the importance of following safety protocols. I stood among the assembled engineers, listening to this fiction being delivered in solemn tones, and understood something that should have been obvious months ago. Iro had been the strongest person in our division, not because he had endured, but because he had retained the capacity to feel horror at what we did, and when that horror became unendurable, he had made the only choice that preserved his humanity. The rest of us, we had adapted, had found ways to continue, to function, to tell ourselves that we were just technicians following orders, just engineers maintaining systems. We had survived by becoming something that could survive in this environment, and that survival was its own kind of death. 14 months into my service with special technical operations, they sent us to Jakku, remote desert planet in the western reaches, population consisting mostly of mining colonies extracting valuable ores from the planet's mineral-rich wastelands. 4,000 miners and support personnel had gone on strike, refusing to meet production quotas, demanding better working conditions and compensation. Corporate management called it labor unrest. ISB called it rebel instigation. Admiral Constantine, commanding officer of our battle group, called it an opportunity for demonstration. "We need these colonies operating at full capacity," he explained during the operational briefing, his image projected large on the conference room display. "The ore they produce is essential for military construction projects. This strike threatens strategic Imperial interests. You will design a compliance solution that is non-lethal but thoroughly persuasive. Something that demonstrates the consequences of defying Imperial authority without causing permanent damage to our labor force. We need workers, not corpses. Make them understand what resistance costs." The assignment was mine. Senior engineer, proven track record, technical expertise in mass environmental control. I had 3 days to design a system that could simultaneously punish 4,000 people with enough severity to break their collective will while keeping casualties low enough that mining operations could resume within a week. I worked for 57 hours straight, existing on STIM tablets and CAF, filling datapads with calculations and schematics and efficiency projections. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Temporary shutdown of life support in the colony's residential modules. Reduce oxygen concentration to 75% for exactly 10 minutes. Enough to cause panic, disorientation, and respiratory distress, but calibrated to avoid unconsciousness or asphyxiation in healthy adults. The system would be automated, synchronized across all modules simultaneously, timed to activate during sleep cycles to maximize psychological impact. I accounted for variables. Age distribution of the population, including 312 children under age 12. Health conditions documented in the colony's medical database. Structural variations in different residential modules that might affect oxygen dispersion rates. I built redundancies, fail-safes, monitoring systems that would track biosigns and automatically abort if casualty projections exceeded acceptable thresholds. This was my masterpiece of compliance engineering. Mass punishment refined to mathematical precision, suffering optimized and controlled. Admiral Constantine approved the design immediately, praised its efficiency, its restraint, its demonstration that Imperial power could be surgical when necessary. The installation took 2 days, our team working in coordination with Navy personnel to integrate my system into the colony's existing life support infrastructure. The miners did not know what we were building, saw Imperial engineers performing routine maintenance and upgrades, assumed this was standard procedure for installations operating under military oversight. The activation occurred at 200 hours local time, when 94% of the colony population was asleep. I observed from the command center aboard the Relentless, monitoring feeds from surveillance cameras installed throughout the residential sectors. My system performed exactly as designed. Oxygen levels dropped smoothly from standard concentrations to 75%, precisely synchronized across all modules. The effect was nearly instantaneous. People woke, gasping, confused, struggling to breathe air that seemed too thin, too empty. Children cried, frightened by their parents' panic and their own bodies' distress. The elderly collapsed, their weaker respiratory systems unable to compensate. Younger adults staggered to doors and windows, pounding, trying to escape into corridors that offered no relief because the entire facility was under environmental control. Some remained calm, recognized what was happening, tried to help others manage their breathing and conserve energy. Most panicked. Humans are not designed to remain rational when suffocation threatens. Evolution has wired us to fight, to flee, to thrash against the air that will not fill our lungs. 10 minutes, 600 seconds during which 4,000 people experienced what it means to be absolutely helpless, to understand that invisible systems controlled by distant engineers can reach into their homes and steal the air from their lungs. I watched faces contorted in terror and oxygen-starved confusion. Watched people collapse, clutch their chests, claw at throats that had not been touched by any physical weapon. Watched parents hold children and whisper reassurances they did not believe, trying to be brave while their own vision tunneled and their hearts hammered against ribs that heaved with inadequate breath. At exactly 10 minutes, my system restored oxygen to normal levels. The response was gradual. Took 90 seconds for concentrations to return to standard, another 3 minutes before people's respiratory distress subsided enough for them to stop gasping and start thinking. Most survived. Most recovered within hours, suffered no permanent damage beyond psychological trauma and the absolute certainty that resistance was futile, that the Empire could reach into their most private spaces and inflict suffering without ever sending a single stormtrooper. 47 people did not regain consciousness. Heart attacks mostly, elderly miners whose cardiovascular systems failed under the sudden stress. A few children with undiagnosed respiratory conditions. 2 young men who died in a stampede when panicking crowds crushed them against sealed doors. 1 woman who had a cerebral aneurysm rupture during the oxygen deprivation. The medical teams classified all deaths as complications arising from subjects' underlying health conditions, not direct results of the environmental adjustment. Technically accurate, legally defensible, morally meaningless. The strike ended 12 hours later. The miners returned to work, met production quotas, caused no further unrest. Admiral Constantine commended my engineering excellence and efficiency, recommended me for promotion to division chief, suggested my techniques could be valuable for other labor management situations where traditional enforcement methods proved insufficient or too resource-intensive. My personnel file noted that I had demonstrated exceptional skill in designing scalable compliance solutions with minimal collateral impact. That night I stood in my quarters aboard the Relentless, staring at my reflection in the polished Durasteel panel that served as a mirror. The face looking back was almost unrecognizable. Gaunt, hollowed, dark circles under eyes that seemed empty of anything that could be called human. I weighed 63 kilograms now, 20 below my academy graduation weight. The uniform hung on my frame like a burial shroud. I touched my cheek, felt bone beneath skin, and wondered when I had become this. When the transformation from idealistic engineer to architect of mass suffering had completed. What precise moment marked the death of Darren Cave from Corellia, who had wanted to build things and fix things and help people, and the birth of this creature who designed machines for calculated torture? I could not identify the moment. There had been no single choice, no dramatic descent. Just a long series of small decisions, each one seemingly inevitable, each one moving me further down a path I had not chosen but had never quite refused. And now, here I stood at the end of that path, looking at a stranger in Imperial uniform, trying to remember what I had believed when I first put it on. Captain Rill changed everything. He was a rebel officer captured during a raid on Onderon, brought to our facility for interrogation regarding Alliance operations in the Quelly sector. Mid-40s, career military, the kind of professional soldier who understood strategy and accepted that war involved hard choices and unpleasant necessities. He did not break easily, withstood the neural shock generator, the sound resonators, the temperature cycling, maintained operational security, refused to provide intelligence that might compromise his people. Impressive discipline, the kind of resistance that ISB found both frustrating and valuable. If we could crack someone like Rill, it would validate our techniques for use against higher value targets. I was supervising his interrogation, monitoring equipment performance, making real-time adjustments to maximize effectiveness. Between sessions, while he recovered enough consciousness for the next round, I entered his cell to check the biomonitor connections. He looked at me with eyes that should have been dulled by pain, but somehow remained focused, intelligent, present. "You're the engineer," he said, his voice hoarse from screaming. "The one who designs the equipment." "That's correct." I made my voice neutral, professional. "You're not ISB, not a soldier, just a technician." He coughed, winced, continued. "Do you understand what you're doing? You're not killing in combat, not making battlefield decisions. You're creating systems for systematic torture. You're sitting in a comfortable room, moving controls, inflicting suffering on helpless people. And when this war ends, when the Empire falls, and it will fall, what will you say? I was just following orders. I was just an engineer maintaining systems. How many times has this galaxy heard those excuses from people who built the machinery of atrocity? His words hit like a physical blow, precisely targeted at the rationalizations I had constructed to insulate myself from what I did. I tried to respond, to assert that he did not understand the complexities, the impossible choices, the alternatives that were worse. But he kept speaking, his voice gaining strength. "I don't hate you," he said. "I pity you. Because I'll die here, probably in the next few days, but I'll die knowing who I was, what I fought for, what I believed. You'll live. You'll survive this war. And every day, for the rest of your life, you'll wake up knowing you were the man who turned human suffering into engineering problems. That you solved those problems with technical excellence. That you're proud of your elegant designs. Can you imagine carrying that?" The interrogation continued. Captain Rill died 6 days later without providing any actionable intelligence. The official report noted subject non-compliance and recommended analysis of resistance factors for future operational improvements. I filed the technical documentation, made notes about equipment performance, and spent the following night staring at the ceiling of my quarters, unable to sleep, hearing his words repeat in my mind like a diagnostic loop that would not terminate. He was right, about all of it. The excuses I had constructed, following orders, serving a larger purpose, believing someone else would do it if I refused, were not justifications. They were evasions, ways of avoiding responsibility for choices I had made and continued making every day. The Darren Cave, who had graduated from the academy, who had believed in order and stability, who had wanted to use his skills to build and fix and help. That person would have been horrified by what I had become, would have refused the first order, accepted the punishment, maintained his principles even if it cost his career or his freedom or his life. But I had not refused, had taken the promotion, pressed the buttons, designed the systems, convinced myself that technical competence was separate from moral responsibility. And now, after 26 months of this work, 47 deaths on Jakku and countless others across a dozen facilities, I faced a choice that was really no choice at all. Continue and become further complicit in atrocities, or refuse and face the same interrogation rooms I had designed, operated by engineers who would tell themselves they were just following orders, just maintaining systems. There was a third option. Iroh had shown me. The memorial service, Commander Vrain's speech about safety protocols, the official fiction that pretended his death was accidental. The message beneath the fiction: this is what happens when you cannot endure anymore, when the horror becomes too large to carry. But I could not do what Iroh did, could not abandon my father on Corellia, whose support payments from my Imperial salary kept him housed and fed in his retirement. Could not throw away my life when it still had potential value, when maybe, somehow, I could find a way to use my position for something other than inflicting suffering. Sabotage. Small, deniable, calibrated to reduce harm without revealing intent. Build defects into my systems, failures that looked like technical glitches but reduced equipment effectiveness. The sound resonator that shorted out after 30 minutes instead of maintaining output for 6 hours. The temperature chamber whose sensors failed, creating discomfort instead of agony. The neural shock generator with power coupling issues that limited maximum intensity. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger investigation, but enough to reduce the efficiency of torture, to save some small fraction of the people being fed into the machinery I'd built. I spent 6 months executing this strategy. Designed systems with hidden weaknesses, trained technicians with incomplete specifications, filed reports that understated equipment capabilities. Saved perhaps 30 people from the worst severity of interrogation. Perhaps. I could not know for certain. Could not measure the effectiveness of my sabotage against the vastness of the suffering I had enabled. But it was something. It was resistance, however small, however inadequate. It was the only way I could think to atone without destroying my father's life or throwing my own away uselessly. Engineer Vexor discovered the pattern. He was younger than me, ambitious, hungry for advancement, the kind of technical analyst who reviewed historical performance data looking for inefficiencies to report to superiors. He noticed that equipment I designed failed more frequently than systems created by other engineers. Noticed that the failures always reduced effectiveness rather than causing catastrophic breakdowns. Noticed that my training protocols emphasized caution and restraint rather than maximum utilization. Compiled his findings into a report submitted directly to ISB. They arrested me at my duty station, surrounded by stormtroopers, the same choreography I had witnessed dozens of times when prisoners were processed for interrogation. Commander Vrain himself conducted the initial interview. His soft, reasonable voice now turned cold and contemptuous. Deliberate sabotage of Imperial security operations, undermining military effectiveness, possible collaboration with rebel elements. He read the charges from a datapad, not bothering to look at me. You've been compromised, Cave. Whether through ideological conversion or simple weakness, you've betrayed the empire you swore to serve. The only question now is the extent of your treachery. Are you working alone or are there others? I confessed everything immediately. Told them about the hidden defects, the training gaps, the reports I had falsified. Gave them complete technical specifications so they could identify and correct every system I had sabotaged. I did not pretend to be brave or principled. I was exhausted. I was empty. I had nothing left to protect except my father, and a cooperation was the only way to ensure ISB did not investigate him for potential complicity in my actions. They moved me to a detention cell. The irony was so perfect, it became almost meaningless. I was locked in a facility I had helped design, surrounded by equipment I had created, subject to the same interrogation techniques I had refined through 2 years of engineering optimization. The neural shock generator worked flawlessly. My modifications had been purely psychological, reducing the generator's effectiveness without altering its fundamental design. When they used it on me at maximum intensity, I understood exactly why subjects screamed. 3 days of interrogation established that I had acted alone, motivated not by rebel sympathies, but by what Commander Vrain called moral cowardice disguised as conscience. The tribunal processed my case with administrative efficiency, guilty of sabotage, treason, and conduct unbecoming an Imperial officer. Sentence: execution by ejection into space, classified punishment typically reserved for traitors whose deaths needed to send messages to their former colleagues. They scheduled it for 1 week after conviction, allowing time for final security reviews and documentation of my case for training purposes, using my betrayal as an example for other engineers who might contemplate similar actions. Now I stand in the airlock chamber, 5 minutes remaining on the countdown timer. My wrists are bound in Durasteel binders that cut into flesh worn thin by stress and malnutrition. My body, 63 kilograms of bone and scarred tissue, and organs that will soon freeze and rupture in vacuum, feels both heavy and insubstantial, like something that has already ceased to exist, waiting for reality to catch up with that cessation. I think about the path that brought me here. From Corellia to the Academy, to the Relentless, to special technical operations, to sabotage, to execution. Each step made sense in isolation. Each choice seemed inevitable given the circumstances. And yet the accumulated trajectory led here, to this cold chamber, to this final countdown. My sabotage saved perhaps 30 lives, reduced suffering for perhaps 100 more. Against that modest accounting, 47 dead on Jakku from my mass punishment system. Hera Syndulla, dead from my neural shock generator. Marcus Trell, broken by my sound resonator. Hundreds more across 26 months of service, tortured by equipment I designed, broken by systems I optimized, destroyed by my technical excellence applied to the engineering of suffering. The mathematics are simple and damning. I am responsible for vastly more harm than good. Captain Rill was right. I turned human suffering into engineering problems and solved them with precision and pride. Airo understood this earlier than I did, saw clearly that there was no way to participate in this machinery without becoming complicit, that technical competence was not separable from moral responsibility, that just following orders and just maintaining systems were not defenses but admissions of cowardice. He made the only choice that preserved his humanity, and I called him weak for it. But he was strong, stronger than I will ever be, because he had the courage to die rather than continue, while I kept finding rationalizations to survive one more day, complete one more assignment, tell myself that tomorrow I would find a way to resist meaningfully. The door in front of me is Durasteel, 3 meters by 2, reinforced and airtight. On the other side is vacuum, the space between Lothal and its moon, cold and empty and infinite. When the countdown reaches 0, this inner door will seal and the outer door will open, and I will be pulled through the airlock into that emptiness. My body will freeze within seconds, blood boiling as pressure drops, lungs collapsing, consciousness fading before the real damage begins. A quick death, they said during sentencing. More merciful than I deserved. Perhaps they are right. 3 minutes. I think about my father on Corellia, who will receive notification that I died serving the Empire, details classified for security reasons. He will believe I was a good son who served honorably. We'll never know what I became, what I did, how I transformed the technical skills he encouraged into instruments of torture. This is mercy, I suppose. Let him remember the son who wanted to build starships and fix systems, not the man who designed machines for systematic cruelty. I think about all the engineers still working in special technical operations. 200 of them across a dozen facilities, maintaining equipment, designing new systems, telling themselves they are just technicians following orders. Tomorrow they will come to work, receive their assignments, press their buttons, make their adjustments. Someone will occupy my former position, inherit my projects, continue the work I started. Young engineer Kyron, 23 years old, brilliant and ambitious, exactly like I was at the academy. He will be promoted to senior technician, will receive his first special assignment, will be told it is necessary, important, serving a larger purpose. And he will make the same choices I made, find the same justifications, descend the same path, until he looks in a mirror and does not recognize the face staring back. The machine continues. Individual engineers are replaceable. The systems persist. The Empire has learned, through decades of refined practice, how to identify people with technical skills and moral flexibility, how to apply incremental pressure that transforms them from idealists into functionaries, how to create conditions where every choice seems inevitable and every refusal seems pointless. They do not need monsters. They need competent professionals who can compartmentalize, who can separate their technical work from its human consequences, who can tell themselves that responsibility belongs to someone else while their hands remain clean because they only press buttons and make adjustments. 2 minutes. Captain Rill asked what I would say when this war ended. When people asked what I did, how I contributed. I have my answer now. I was a coward who mistook technical competence for moral neutrality, who believed that engineering systems was different from inflicting suffering, even though my systems had no other purpose, who told himself he was serving order and stability while building machinery for torture, who made every wrong choice and called it inevitable, who discovered too late that there are some things that cannot be fixed, some systems that should not be maintained, some orders that must be refused regardless of the cost. I am Darren Cave. I'm 24 years old. I designed interrogation equipment that broke bodies and minds with mathematical precision. I killed 47 people on Jakku to demonstrate Imperial power. I betrayed a former classmate to preserve my position. I sabotaged my own systems far too late to matter, saved a handful of lives against hundreds I destroyed. And now I will die in vacuum, my body frozen and broken, carrying knowledge that no amount of punishment can erase or redeem. 1 minute. The inner door seals with a heavy metallic thud that I feel through the deck plating. Atmosphere begins venting from the airlock chamber, standard safety protocol to prevent explosive decompression when the outer door opens. My ears pop. My breathing becomes labored as air thins. I can see the countdown timer on the bulkhead display, red numerals ticking down through final seconds. I wonder if anyone will remember me. If my name will appear in histories of this war as a footnote, an example of the ordinary people who enabled extraordinary evil. If future engineers will study my case in ethics courses, analyzing where I went wrong, what choices I should have made, how to recognize when following orders becomes participation in atrocity. Probably not. I'm not important enough for history. Just another technician, another functionary, another person who made terrible choices and paid the price while the machine he served continued operating without pause. 30 seconds. 20. 10. My final thought is not of myself, not of my father or my lost idealism or the path I chose. My final thought is of Engineer Karen, 23 years old, receiving his first assignment tomorrow morning, looking at a control panel, seeing green status indicators and familiar interfaces and a simple adjustment that needs to be made. Thinking, I'm just a technician, just maintaining systems. This is not my responsibility. This is not my fault.